Hi guys, my name is Vix, and if you're new here, we do a whole bunch of things from DIY to creating so many things, animals, lifestyle, any of my hobbies really. Today we're going to be looking at building an aquarium from the ground up, and I'm really excited about this one because it's one I've been wanting to do for a long time. If you guys have been watching the channel for a while, you may know that I used to own an axolotl called Pedro when I lived at home. Although I did the best I could with the resources I had, I really feel like I can do so much better now. I had so many issues with looking after Pedro, from temperature to water quality to even just feeding. Since I was living at home, I couldn't exactly have a bucket of worms sitting in my room. So although I did the best I could with Pedro with the resources that I had at the time, he didn't live as long as he should have and had a lot of complications. But I now believe that I'm in a position where I can try again. And this time we are sparing no expense because I can. We will be creating a 4-foot axolotl aquarium. It's going to have a canister filter, a chiller, which is probably the most expensive item that I've gotten from an aquarium. It's going to be fully planted, a nice fine sand substrate, and basically any bits and pieces I think that we need to add to it. Now, this is not going to be the complete build. I'll be building this aquarium in January, and I'm not going to be able to get an axolotl until at least late February due to some scheduling things. But that's fine, because that means that we've basically got a month or two to fully make sure that this aquarium is ready to go. Before we hop into the video though, I've got a couple of announcements to make. This year we're going to be participating in Game to Give. Game to Give is a charity event organised by the Bungie Foundation. It's going from the 23rd of January to the 9th of February and will help make an impact in 3 main areas: children's health and well-being, disaster relief, and inclusion, diversity, and equity efforts. There's a link down in the description if you'd like to donate, and there's a whole bunch of fun incentives and milestones. Some of these have been provided by Bungie, so things like emblem codes and such that you can redeem in the game Destiny 2, and other incentives have been provided by me to make some fun things happen on stream. As a community, we've already raised over $1 million, and I really appreciate any support you can give in this area. Even if you can't give money, you can always help spread awareness, and I'm really excited to see what we can achieve together. But now, let's get into making this aquarium, and we'll start off with a plan. For this particular setup, we're going to go with a 4-foot tank. We're also going to use a really fine white sand, a canister filter, a chiller, as axolotls like cold temperatures, and this will feed back into the tank with a spray bar. As for the decor, I kind of wanted to 3D print some decorations. I wanted to go for like a Greek, Roman, Atlantis sort of feel. So I wanted to start with these columns, some ruins, and also some sort of statue. I actually cheated and came up with this drawing after the tank was made, so I know what the statue looks like, but at the time of thinking what I wanted to have, I wasn't really sure. I was just scrolling through some 3D printing libraries online to see what was available. We're also going to go with some plants that I already have in my possession. We're going to start with a Vallisonera giant, which I currently had in Puff's tank, but it's just really too big for that tank. We're also going to grab the corkscrew variant as well, and some old wood that's kind of been sitting in the bird room for a while, but it used to be in my tanks. For some more plants, we're going to pull out some Anubis nana. This is a great bare root, low light plant, which I think is going to love this tank. As well as some wisteria, which I'm starting to realize I don't really like the look of wisteria. I find it looks a bit too messy and a bit too, like the leaves are too large, but it'll work for this tank. We're also going to add its arguably better counterpart, which is lace fern, which I just really prefer the look of, as well as some pops of color with narrow ligwigia, which I can never say correctly, but I really love this plant. Once you get it in the right conditions, it just has these really bright red colors, and the leaf shape is just beautiful. We're going to pop some more Anubis around the place and just sort of spread out the plants a bit more until it looks more natural. As for the light, I wasn't really sure what I was going to use at this stage. Axolotls prefer low light, so whatever I was going to grab, it needed to have a dimmer, but also sort of look after the plants too. We're also going to add a temperature probe because I really like being able to visually see where the temperature is at from afar. As for the canister filter and the chiller, I'm going with the regular canister filters I use, the Aqua ones, and the chiller will be a Halia. As I mentioned earlier, this video is not going to be a complete build. There are a few things we're missing. First one is some sort of cave or hide to make the axolotl feel safe, and the second is of course the axolotl. With that out of the way though, now we can get to the fun part. We picked up this aquarium from Roxy's Aquarium. Never been to them before, but they were a great help and really made sure that we got the best value for money and the best tools for the job. I think getting the aquarium home and in position is always the scariest thing ever, particularly with this one. There was so much packaging on it. I was really worried that we were going to accidentally crack it, but the glass was really good quality. It was really thick, and yeah, it already survived a couple of car rides, so it was going to be fine. And big shout out for Joel for helping me with this. Yeah, there's no way I would have been able to do this on my own, so thank you. Look at that absolute precision in getting that in there. And a little shake test to make sure it's not going to fall over. Oh, and don't worry, Ida was helping out too. She was definitely inspecting absolutely everything and also trying to steal all the foam. That was a little annoying. She made a big mess. But here is a look at a chiller. We actually got this much sooner than when the aquarium came, so this is kind of in the wrong order. Again, Ida really wanted to inspect the package and get in on the video. We went for Halia, which we found out later is actually one that most people use for this, and we actually got it from an aquaponics store. Couldn't get them from aquarium stores, only from aquaponics stores. So there you go. One thing I immediately noticed as I was pulling out all the parts from the box was that the piping and fittings were a different size to what the canister filter was going to be, and this is going to be an issue later, but for now I was just thinking, well, this is an issue for future Vics, not for now. But that being said, I think I would have gone with the same model regardless. And here is the filter, which also came a bit earlier than the tank. This one is the Aqua One Aquarius. I think this is the 1050 model. I use these on all of my tanks. I considered going with a Flugel or something instead, which was a bit cheaper, but considering I use these all the time, I figured I may as well stick with it and I'll have extra parts if I need them. Ido again is stealing foam, as is normal. But here I am trying to put together all the piping while she's still stealing foam. As I said before, we opted for a spray bar for this one. I thought it would be much better to distribute the flow and not have the flow too high for the axolotl. I also found out that if you angle spray bars upwards, which I do later in the video, you can increase the oxygen in the water because it'll ripple on the surface. So I'm going to start doing this for all my tanks. It made a huge difference. So here's all the piping set up, looking good. And Ido is on high alert, looking for more foam to steal. Now the easy part was done and I had to start connecting all the tubing up. Ido again, very curious about this part. I'm not sure why this had her so interested. I think she was just looking for things to steal. With these Aqua One canister filters, make sure you just remove all the plastic that's covering some of the filter media. Give it a look through. Put it together, make sure it's all good. And once that's all clipped up again, we can start looking at the chiller and how this is all going to connect up. This is when I was absolutely very sure that these pipes were not going to connect up. I had a feeling, but then actually having it in my hands, yeah, it wasn't going to work. So I started with the easy part and decided to connect the inlet to the filter. This was all going to be the same size pipe. And then I moved on to the trickier part. I ended up coming up with this contraption. There was some duct tape holding some parts together to make sure they didn't leak because the seal wasn't quite perfect. I was going to replace it with some plumbing tape later on that would be watertight, but I actually found that this worked, so at the moment I'm just not going to touch it until I need to. And now we get to the fun part. We get to actually decorate the tank. We're going to start by putting this sand in here. I didn't actually rinse this. I don't usually rinse it. And I was surprised to see how clean this sand was. Ida was also very surprised to see how clean it was. For the footprint of this tank, I opted for 30 kilograms of this sand. I just needed about 5 centimeters was what I was aiming for, and this worked out well. If you guys are curious as to what product I'm using for this, I'll flash the label up in a second, but it's not a very good footage of it, sorry. One thing I would recommend though, and it's probably a bit of an edge case scenario, if you have fake nails or polygel nails or something of the sort, maybe don't try to spread sand when they're starting to come off, because I got so much sand stuck underneath them. It was such a pain to sort out. But this little aquarium gravel rake thing was just not doing the job. There was too much sand, so I had to use my hands for this one. Now, as for the decorations, we're actually going to be 3D printing these. I'm going to go with this PETG filament. You can use PLA for aquariums. It is safe, but it might degrade over time with the lights. So we're going to try this one. And I'll tell you what, I did not enjoy printing with this filament. It was just so unruly. Like, I got the job done, but I actually struggled to get it off the base plate. Like, that's where we were at with it. These columns were absolutely beautiful though. They're not my design. I got these from Cults 3D by a author called STL Warehouse. I'll have a link in the description below if you guys want to buy them for yourself. They were like $1. It was so worth it. And I mean, they'd be awesome for some models, for D&D, you name it. Absolutely gorgeous. I printed these in parts just to make it a bit easier so I could use less supports and glue them together with some super glue. I then took the model again and just sliced off the base so I could get the columns on their own, just to add some extra decor around the tank and really tie it all in. I think they actually sell some of these models like in different configurations. So some with the columns, some that are corners, some that are walls, if you do want to get some higher quality versions, but I just wanted the quick way out of this. We're also going to boil that piece of wood I said was sitting in the bedroom for a while that I've used in aquariums before. I'm not expecting this to sink, but I was kind of hoping this would allow it to. But now we get to fill up the tank, and yeah, Ida's definitely helping. Yep, definitely not drinking up the water. Keep an eye out for her in this section. She comes back and does it a lot just to try and see if she can get away with not being seen. We're going to be filling up the tank just using a little pond pump. I use this for my water changes and it just makes it so much easier to clip the pipe from to the side and just let it run. And we'll pop on a little time lapse of this happening. You'll see me going back and forth with some extra buckets to keep filling up the bucket that's got the pump in it. We're also going to start laying out all the decorations. You can see the wood's in there already. I've just popped in some of the columns. And now we're going to go steal some plants from the other tank. I had absolutely so many plants in Puff's tank. It was getting overgrown. It needed a good trim anyway, but the Vallisneria is definitely coming from this tank. It just seems to get lost in Puff's tank. It's all hidden at the back and it's really not shining. So I thought it'd be so much better in this one, and it can provide some shade for the axolotls too. I'll leave a few pieces in Puff's tank just in case this stuff melts with the colder temperatures, but tried to pull out as much as possible. We're also going to add in the wisteria now. We're just going to pop that behind the log. What are you doing, Ida? Oh my god. Okay. You do that. She was a bit unsure about the Vallisneria though, but to be fair, this stuff is huge. Like, I think one piece was almost 6 foot. And once that piece is in, let's put in some of the lace fern as well. I absolutely love how lace fern looks. It's just so fine and delicate and detailed. Adds such beautiful character to any tank. But we'll also put in some wisteria as well. How about we speed the rest of this up? Let's put in some columns, some more plants, and let that water level just rise all the way to the top. We'll start putting in some of the Anubias Nano in here at the moment, and then we'll move on and add some of the Ludwigia as well. Even with the lights off, you can see that pop of red, and I just really like the interest that it adds to the tank. Now we'll start adding the lids to the tank. We've got 4 glass panes here, and tell you what, these are really high quality, and I love these so much more than any of the other lids on my tanks. It's gonna take a little while for the water to clear up and for the plants to settle in, but damn, I can really start seeing the vision now. This is gonna be gorgeous once it's ready. But we're still missing the statue, so let's start slicing that and printing it. I'll have a link in the description if you guys want to print the model for yourself. Now, this was the first real test for my new Neptune printer. I've never really printed anything with this level of detail on a filament printer before and had good results. I usually just opt for the resin printer, but I can't use the resin printer when there's animals and aquariums involved. However, the filament printing for this one, oh my god, it turned out amazing and I'm really impressed. As a side note, we're also going to add some fertilizer in the form of Sea Chem Flourish. I use this on all my tanks, including the shrimp tank, and it works really well. But now the statue is complete, so let's get it off the printer and have a look. This was actually my first time using tree supports, and oh my god, I really love them. These are great. It's so much easier to take off. But inspecting the statue, this is really good quality. I was very impressed. Even got the fingers. The face has got a little bit of issues, but otherwise this is really good. we're just going to try and like manually drill a little hole in the end so that all of the air can come out when we put it into the tank. And I actually forgot to do this on all the pillars, so we're going to go back and do that as well. I found that just putting them upside down underwater and shaking them out eventually got all the air bubbles out. And then you can sort of just float them and see when the buoyancy is diminished enough that they'll sink. We're just going to speed through the rest of it because it's a lot of the same now. Not sure if you can tell here, but that log was still trying to float up. I'm just going to leave it underwater and see if it eventually sinks. For most of this video, it's lodged a little bit underneath the spray bar to keep it down, but now it's just resting under the sand a bit. At this point, Ido came by to inspect and seemed to be quite happy with this development. I was expecting this light to still take another week, but damn, I got lucky and it was delivered in like 3 days. This was just one from Amazon. I'll have a link in the description. It is an affiliate link, but I quite like this light, to be honest. This is quite nice. Came with those typical metal stands. I might replace them at some point with some 3D printed stands, but I'm not really sure what I want yet. This one's just controlled by a little remote, but I found that I could stick it into a PowerPoint timer and it retained the previous state, so it wasn't an issue if you wanted to pair it with like a smart plug or something. The remote really confused me until I worked out it's actually 2 separate lines of control. You can control the white light and you can control a secondary like color light. And I really like this because it meant that I could tone the white to really bring out the reds, the greens, any of the colors I wanted to highlight in this tank. We will be dimming this light considerably once the axolotl is here, but for now I just really want to make sure those plants have the best chance to situate themselves strongly in the sand. The camera's not going to pick this up too well, but here's the dimming feature here. And also me trying to like tone in that secondary color light to get the best result from the plants. Still got a few more extra plants to add in here. Some of these are coming from Puff's tank and others are coming from the paludarium. Already, just from this framing alone, this is looking amazing. So this is what it's looking like probably a day after putting all the plants in. Still pretty cloudy and it's going to take some time for that to clear up. But I'm not planning on getting the axolotl until late February anyway, at the earliest due to some scheduling issues. Where this is positioned, it's not getting as much glare as some of my other tanks. Most of my tanks face the biggest window in our house, which is awful for taking videos of them. And Puff's tank just reflects all of the white walls in the house. But this one is facing perpendicular to all of those tanks. It's actually facing the same orientation as the shrimp tank. And if you've seen my video on the shrimp tank, you can see that it's much better than any of my tanks for getting videos of it. The way this is positioned, it is perfect for watching TV. You can actually see the TV perfectly over the top of it from the kitchen, at least at my height, and I'm sure at Joel's height it's even better. So here's how the tank is looking now, probably about a week before this video comes out. The cloudiness has died down heaps, and although it's still got a little bit of a way to go, it's looking absolutely amazing and it's making me want to sit at the kitchen table more just to admire this tank. As I mentioned previously, we've still got a couple of gaps in this particular build. We still need to find some sort of cave or hide for the axolotl. Originally I was going to make like a Pantheon design with these pillars and that would be the hide, but now I'm not so sure. Maybe we'll use something I've already got or we'll 3D print something in a future video. We'll see how we go. But for now, this was super fun to put together. It's been a long while since I've gotten to make an aquarium from scratch, and this was just an absolute pleasure every step of the way. Except for maybe, you know, sorting out those pipes that were different measurements. That was a bit of a pain. Besides that, had a blast of a time. And the result just speaks for itself. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I had an absolute blast making this video. This aquarium looks absolutely stunning, as I've mentioned before, and I'm really glad we went all out with this. I think the most expensive component was the chiller, which was around $600 Australian dollars. When I looked at getting a chiller for my first axolotl build, I think they were like $1,000, and it was just not something that was plausible for me to use. But I'm so glad I got it for this one because I'm able to keep the temperature so stable, and it just makes it so much easier. I'm also really glad we went with the canister filter. I'm using these for every single aquarium now in my possession, and they're just amazing. They can be a little tricky to clean. They're great if you want to over filter the aquarium and get some really nice flow and airflow as well. as with this spray bar, we'll really be able to keep the oxygen levels high in this tank. Big shout out to Roxy Aquarium for helping me choose the right materials for this particular build. Originally, when I ordered the tank and the sand online, they realized pretty quickly that I've actually chosen the wrong sand and it was not quite fine enough for this application, so they were more than willing to help swap it over for me. They even upgraded the tank for me because the one I chose they didn't have in stock, and they gave me a tank that was actually really good, and it's probably the nicest tank in my possession. I'll have a video out for you guys when I eventually get the axolotl, but for now I'm happy to just let the tank mature and to research as much as possible so that I'm fully prepared for when he comes along. Thank you guys for coming with me on this journey, and I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you may be. Bye guys!